Anderson.
All right, the committee meeting of the whole tonight to start off. This is something that we've implemented just from the staff's perspective on reading of ordinances on our charter. The typical charter would have multiple readings of an ordinance as it goes through a process, especially a new ordinance. And so what we've done is we've used the first reading through committee meeting of the whole, and it's basically just to introduce the ordinance. There's still work to be done on the ordinance, but the two that we actually have, they would be ordinances 422 and 423, and they are new ordinances for water utility and sewer utility. These ordinances actually come from recommendation from Attorney Steve Tinty, who, if you remember, the City Council contracted, engaged to do the water and sewer project, the legal service for water and sewer project. Mr. Tinty looked at our ordinances, and there needed some update. So if you look at the letter from Mr. Tinty, it does show for each one what the major parts of the ordinance are. Again, I would just want to basically do a reading, give you additional time for the next couple of weeks to look through it, ask additional questions, and I do want, going to ask Mr. Tinty to come to the next meeting and explain on the ordinance. So basically, like I said, our ordinance number 422, ordinance regulating the providing of water, the use of public and private water systems, installing and connecting a building, water lines, the establishing of rates and collection procedures, and providing penalties for violations thereof. Ordinance 423 is the same as, but for sewer. And we did run into, when you looked at our sewer ordinance, I believe goes back a little farther than our water ordinance, but they both go back 20 plus years, and they're in need of updating. So if you have any basic questions on it, I can field them. Other than that, this is the idea is pretty much just to get this read, get it in, and have you guys start looking at it, and getting back with me. And again, we'll have this come up at our next meeting, and have Mr. Tinty here to answer any specific questions. So,
Any questions, Council?
okay.
Call the orders, pledge to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brew?
Here.
Mr. Babalani?
Here.
Dr. Hayes?
Here.
Mr. Menegini?
Here.
Mr. Pop?
Here. Approval of minutes of the regular meeting on November 7th, 2016. The only correction I saw was Mr. Hopper's was spelled wrong. It's H-A-E-P-E-R-S.
What did you say, H-A-E?
H-A-E-P-E-R-S, yeah. He was 2 seats ahead of me in school. Any other additions or corrections?
I make a motion we approve the regular meeting notes from November 7, 2016.
Support.
Because that is as correct.
As corrected.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Approval of manifest 2016-21 in the amount of $512,934.82. Mr. Pop, any questions?
No, I have nothing.
I have nothing either.
Mr. Menegini?
I got one here. Page 6, 4 from, under wastewater. Palms Tire Service, Inc., one tire replace / scrap mount number 410 for $624. So what unit was that, Ray? I mean, number 410, but seems like an awful lot for one tire.
I'll have to double check. 410, I believe, is a pickup. Unless it might be the Vector truck.
No, Okay, well, check into that for me. That's all I have.
Mr. Bubbalani?
I got one on page 6, being we're right there. 1/5/8 mill hose, or milk hose. I believe that's a garden hose for $120.
No, there's got to be additional items on there. It's a description. I'll double check and
Email?
let you know.
Okay. The Mead and Hunt Engineering, are we pretty much current on that? It's page 5, down on the bottom, the last two items, one for 2,600, one for 3,900, being the project is bid. Are we pretty much squared away with that until construction, or?
Well, I guess you have to ask Bruce.
What we found out there was, and I don't have a copy of what you're looking at there, but Mary found out through some checking that invoices dated May for April time, somehow had gotten lost in the office and had never gotten paid. So there could be a double set on there this time.
There was a double set.
Yeah, and the reason is, she told me she was gonna put them on there, is because somehow those, I don't know how those look like, but. So there's usually, only two, one for water, one for sewer, but there could be four on there. And as far as your question, Mark, you know, there's been a little bit going on because of this, the paper associated with all the stuff that happens after taking bids. That's kind of ongoing. We're gonna get to a point here, once we get through bonds and insurances and contracts and stuff we have to do for our DLP, quite a lull, you know, before we get to construction. We don't know yet whether the contractor for the wastewater treatment plant's gonna wanna do anything that includes inside in the winter. Or if he does, we're not gonna have, you know, probably an inspector here, so
Okay,
I don't know if that answers it. There is some ongoing stuff now.
okay. On page 5, Ray, on the top couple for the electric, low-income heating assistant payments, what are these? Are these part of those, I see there's a bunch of different months on there.
Yep.
Those are for that mandated shut-off notice, is that what that's for? Shutting
Well-
off in the winter, or?
Right, that's the governor's proclamation in the legislature's ruling that electric utilities, they either opt in or opt out, and if you're in the program, then there's a 98 cents per meter charge, 98.99. They tell you at the beginning of July what you're supposed to put on. That money, basically, we collect it and send it to the state.
Yeah,
So that's what
I
it is.
understand that.
Okay.
But I was also under the impression that some of that was for water, that you couldn't shut off water, because I think the water through the state size is more important than the power. I was under that impression when we talked about this
No.
several times.
That's not my
There's-
understanding.
There's nothing, okay, there's nothing in there for the water meters to be shut off?
No, the water meters are regulated under the drain code.
Okay,
It's a different code.
so there's no
No,
payments for that?
no,
To the
actually,
state?
no, actually, what they did was, they chose electric meters over gas meters, for whatever reason. And it's actually subsidizing home heating, which is normally gas. You know, I don't know the whole
Okay.
theory behind it, but that's what they did.
Yeah, I seen the heating part, and it is on the electric side. That's all I have.
Is there a motion to approve the manifest?
I'll make a motion, we approve manifest number 2016-21 in the amount of $512,934.82.
Support.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Anybody in the audience like to make any comments on tonight's agenda items? If not, there'll be time at the end of the meeting for comments on any subject. Next on the agenda is vacate right-of-way, approve 80 linear feet of Lakeside Drive. Mr. Anderson.
You need to go into public hearing.
Is there a motion to go into public hearing?
I make a motion, we go into public hearing.
Support.
Roll call.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Okay, we're in a public hearing to discuss vacating about 80 feet of Lakeside Drive, starting from 12th Avenue North. And I've given you, at the last meeting, you passed a resolution, or for the resolution to go forward, going for public hearing on this issue. We did contact the 4 homeowners that live on Lakeside Drive, and we received information back from all 4. We just recently received 2 of the letters today, and 1 was a verbal. So we have 3 letters back, 1 verbal. 3 of the 4 were okay with it. 1 was not okay with it, with objection. Again, your letter was provided based on that objection, and I guess we can start from there if you want to discuss that.
Well, I certainly don't believe we should vacate it. I don't think we should make it more difficult for our garbage collection or our snow plowing.
Well, I guess I had suggested it when it first was talked about, and all of the neighbors seemed to be on board with it, and the garbage truck and the public works for plowing seem to be on board with it, but now it seems like the major card holder here that it was gonna affect the most is, has some observation about it, so I think that maybe we shouldn't do it. Because the major person that it was gonna affect has some recollection that maybe it's not quite what she wants. She turned that in today, I think it was about 3:30, Ray?
Are there any comments in the audience or any other comments from the council?
Just how much of an inconvenience would it be if we decided not to vacate it? I mean, the garbage truck said it was okay. I don't really see a problem where the plow will just come in there and stop and back up and scoot back out.
There was a question as to where we would deposit the snow.
Well,
That
that
was
would,
probably the bigger question. I was gonna have it just deposited, basically
where it's being vacated.
go around
there.
the corner and deposit in the middle of the road, because if you deposit one side or the other, you're in somebody's yard. We'd have some problems.
Does the plow make 2 swipes through there, one way and one the other way, or is it just a one?
Well, they drive through now,
Yeah.
making the swipes. I think, when the road was, constructed, and I wasn't here at the time, but she said that they were discussing, the city was discussing, a cul-de-sac, and decided to make this configuration for the purpose of plowing and garbage,
How many years ago was that? That's quite a while back.
at least mid-nineties, when they, sold that house and where she built. So, one option is to not, based on the objection, not move forward, and monitor it for a year. I think, when Mark suggested we do this, it was mainly because we've had so many washout problems that a grass area down that section, if we topsoiled it and put grass in there, that it would not wash out, we wouldn't have so much trouble. We just put the storm sewer in, maybe we monitor it for a year, and if we have washout problems still, of course, we should evaluate our storm sewer, but,
Right.
then I think we may have a better case, and she may actually then not object if she sees there's a problem.
I think her main objection was because she wasn't guaranteed that the cul-de-sac was gonna be there.
That's true. How are they gonna
If the
turn around?
cul-de-sac would
Lot of
have been
questions.
there, it might have been a different story, and like I said, she changed her mind at 3:30 today, so.
Well, every week they pick up garbage. That means backing up the garbage truck every week. They plow the snow every snowfall. That means backing up the truck. every snowfall. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think
The whole
originally, like,
project doesn't make any sense to me, but wasting $65,000 on that is beyond me, but
well, I don't really consider it wasted, Doc, because we've had this problem for numerous years, and now the problem is gone. So, I mean, you can say you wasted it, but I don't consider it wasting, because we solved a major issue over on that side of town.
And the labor, after every storm, was killing us there too. I mean, I don't regret putting in the storm sewer system, which helped the whole hill.
well, we could have paved the street and filled in the ditch with rocks, and it would have worked as well, I believe, but that's all done with. I shouldn't make any more complaints. So we have to decide on this. So is there any other questions from the audience?
When you vacate a street like this, is the city still responsible for it?
No, if it's vacated, then it's deeded to the landowners.
So the landowner is responsible for taking care of the road?
Well, it wouldn't be a road anymore, it would be grass, and they'd be responsible for mowing it.
It's not the whole road. The road goes, it makes a 90-degree turn, and so it's just the north-south section. So there's still a public right-of-way that goes to the homes that the city would still be maintaining. That's mainly the argument.
Is there any other questions or any other comments from the council or anybody in the audience? Any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? All right, otherwise, we need a motion to go back into open session.
I'll make a motion, we go back into open session.
Support.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes?
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes?
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Next on the agenda, ordinance 421, Norway Area Zoning Ordinance Amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular ordinance amendment, it's basically, we did a similar amendment for ordinance 401 when we entered into our first Norway area zoning code with Norway Township. We basically, because of the number of changes, it's just cleaner to repeal the previous ordinance and have a wholly new ordinance with those changes. Under 421, under these changes this year, we went from Chapter 1 all the way through Chapter 16, and page by page. It took about 18 months with the Planning Commission, with the help of QPAD and Mr. Carlson with the legal, and there are a number of issues that we addressed. We've had new changes in the law from a state zoning and planning in dealing with the right to farm. We had to change some of our language on mobile home. It's now manufactured home. So there were a number of areas, and I tried to highlight them in one of the attachments. Most of the changes from section to section were dealing mainly with definitions and cleaning up the language. There were some changes based on some of the problems and issues we were having. Some of those really gets down to in the sign ordinance, where political signs, we had to make a big change based on some rulings out of the Supreme Court on freedom of speech. And so we made some changes there. And we made some big changes in access management, where we had very restrictive language in our previous ordinance, and that ordinance actually was done more globally with across Dickinson County with MDOT, and we just looked at it and said it didn't fit in our community as well. So basically, the overlay, there is an overlay zone. It was 350 feet wide. We lowered that down to 100, and we deleted a whole section that dealt with setbacks and widths and whatnot that just isn't gonna, it didn't make sense for us in our community. So, I guess I'm going to leave this open to any specific questions from my report. I will say that Norway Township brought this up at their November 14th meeting and passed the ordinance. If we pass it this evening, which I hope we do, we will move forward with doing a joint shared publication. We will have to publish in the Norway, or in the Iron Mountain, in the Daily News, because the Current no longer runs a weekly, they do a monthly paper, and we would not meet our publishing deadlines for both us and the township. But if the other thing is, if there are still a couple of issues that we have to address, the medical marijuana legislation that just came out, we did postpone passing this for approximately 30 to 60 days based on that just coming out, and it was pointed out that that really needs to take more time, and we're going to need to continue on at the Planning Commission level. One of the things the councils and the township board are going to have to actually initiate that process, and we can work, Grant and I will help the council, start that process depending on what we want to do with it. If there are other areas that we need to have the Planning Commission continue to review, if there's some areas that you feel like we need to continue and possibly change, I would recommend, and I'll turn it over to Grant at that point, that we still pass this amendment and then direct the Planning Commission to review and make those changes so the township can also then make the changes. At this point, you cannot make any change to it without going back and redoing the public hearing that we already had and some of the other processes that we have. So, Grant, I don't know if you had anything you want to add to that?
Not particularly. I'm here to obviously answer any questions I can if you guys have them. But Ray and I have talked about the changes. I've had a few questions from city councilmen as well and city council people. Try to address them as best we can. The document obviously is quite extensive. These zoning issues, as Ray and I have discussed, zoning is always, it's a bit of a term of art, or it's a crafting art. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to cover every possible contingency because you frankly can't. But working with QPAD and the Planning Commission, it seems like they've done a very thorough job, as noted by Ray. They've been doing this for 18 months. And there were some areas that needed to be cleaned up, and it appears as though they've done a nice job of accomplishing that.
Is there any other questions from the council?
I just got a little comment, Doc. There's been an awful lot of time and effort put into this, and I don't care how much time and effort is put into it. Somewhere, somehow, someplace down the line, something's going to pop up where it's going to be a gray area. But everybody did their best to redo it.
Any other comments from the council? Otherwise, we need a motion to approve.
I make a motion, we approve ordinance number 421, the Norway area zoning ordinance.
Support.
Mrs. Brew,
Yes.
Mr. Babalani,
Yes.
Dr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Menegini.
Yes.
Mr. Pop.
Yes.
Approval of the USDA RD Sewer Project Phase 1 WWTP recommendations for bid award. Mr. Anderson, or do we have Bruce to?
Yep, we talked about this at the last meeting. Mr. Hawkinson came and Bruce came and gave his presentation, mainly where we're going, and we have a couple of recommendations to move forward. I believe that the RD has said that they want us to move forward and get the recommendation for bid award, to have the council move us forward, and then it's all part of the process to get to bond closing.
Right. The one thing I would say, the first one on the agenda is the wastewater treatment plant, and that one needs to be, the award needs to be made contingent upon RD approval, which is what I put in the cover letter I wrote. The second one, I probably said the same thing, but we ended up having to submit our our letter of recommendation to RD as part of the subsequent funding. And we already, so then, based on that, we already have gotten their concurrence. A letter came through from the state engineer, Andy, concurring in that award, so that contingent upon RD approval would not have to be in the second one.
I have that in both resolutions.
Yeah, that's fine, if it's in there, it doesn't matter. I didn't know how you were doing that. So I don't know if you want to get through those bid awards. There are some other things we need to discuss at some point. It could be now or it could be later.
Might as well discuss it now.
Under those street resurfacing part of the project, we had met with Coleman last week, Ray?
Yeah.
And we talked about the radius coming onto the cross streets. Do you know anything about that as far as how far they were gonna pave that was in the project, in the radiuses on the cross streets, like between Iron and Mine?
I think we're going around the radius to where it ends, past the sidewalk and across. We're not going down the block very far.
Yeah, I understand that, but it does,
Yes.
in the project, it does cover the radiuses.
Yes, yeah, because we're putting in new curbs. The curbs will be, if they're not new now, they will be new around the radius, right?
Okay.
Hopefully we'll have good water and then we can finish in the unused or unfinished parts of the project at that time.
At what
Any
point do we look at bidding out the rest of those cross streets? I know that has nothing to do with this project, but what do you think?
Well, the city will have to look at all of the things that may be left. I mean, there are some parts of the project where we're only putting in one utility, where only, say, half the project is set to be redone. There's like Second Avenue, where we're not doing any work for 1 or 2 blocks on the east end. All of Second Avenue will be new. So we'll have to put together some kind of, data sheet with all that stuff so the city can see how they might want to do that. Now, the cross streets, that's a much bigger deal. If you wanted to do that, you'd have to figure out just, what kind of costs are involved, and where your priorities are, and what you want to do and what you don't want to do.
How is that $400,000 savings out of the waste plant gonna affect?
It's nothing to do with that. You can't cross that.
I know you can't cross them, but how is that gonna take up the punch list that we had of extras for the waste plant? Is that gonna cover a lot of those projects or
Well,
not?
that's one of the items I was referring to and some things to discuss. And, it's up to you whether you want to get into that now or after you do the award thing. The award things I think we need to do regardless. So if you want to talk about that now, we can talk about whatever you want now before you actually do the awards.
Well, I suspect we should do the awards and then maybe have planning sessions. We don't have to discuss those right now, or we don't have to do it even this month or next month, probably.
Yeah, no, we have to talk about some of those things tonight. But we don't have to do it as part of the awards. But I would come back up here later, whenever it's appropriate. It's however you want to do it.
Well, why don't we just mention, because I think it's actually going to go quite quickly. We did add the secondary priorities letter in the packet. And in that letter, Bruce had put out, a listing of those extra items that we discussed.
Yeah, one thing that, and if you read that letter, it's kind of the way it starts out. I didn't really have a good understanding of that when I talked to you 2 weeks ago. In the past, when bids came in under and there was extra money in a project, communities always spent it doing something, another block of sewer, buy a backhoe, whatever, because you didn't have to have any pre-approvals of that. So hardly ever at the beginning of a project did communities de-obligate funds. And it was only about 4 or 5 years ago when the national office said, now we're not going to let you just do that. Do whatever you want. Anything you want to do has to be kind of approved up front somehow. That's why we had those second priority items that I gave you a copy of in an addendum to the preliminary engineering report we did.
Now, the big,
Just let me, yeah. So, but what I found out is that you can de-obligate the money. You can actually tell RD, that, remember it was 411,000 and change? And you're not gonna use any of that for any of those items. I mean, this is one kind of extreme. You're not gonna do any of those 4 items on there. You can't really afford to do the sludge one anyway, there isn't enough money, but you're not gonna do those, and you want them to de-obligate the money. And what they will do then is they will do that, and they will redo the amortization schedule. And so you will not be borrowing that $411,000, and your payments on that loan will be roughly $14,000 less a year, 14,000 something, approximately. So this is one of the things we really do need to discuss, and we don't need to have a decision tonight, but we need to have one probably no later than your next meeting, because I know when this packet goes in tomorrow, that RD is gonna ask, okay, what about the remaining funds? What are you gonna do with those? So,
If you go to Bruce's letter, which says secondary priorities, it's under the wastewater treatment plant, the first agenda item here. And on page 3, it's actually page 2 of his attachment to his letter, there's a list of those 4 items that make up the wish list.
I put a
Of those-
box around them.
Huh?
I put a box around them.
Yeah, you put a box around it, it's on that page. Item number 1 is that Class A sludge system that we were looking at very seriously a couple of years ago. That item is no longer really in favor, that's a way to put it.
Do you folks all have those? I see some of you thumbing through trying to find.
Yeah, it's in there.
You're
mixed in
all
there.
looking at them? Okay.
Yeah, it's in that one. So, item 1 is $400,000 and
Plus engineering.
plus engineering. And that, like I said, that when talking with Bob, I think he's ready to move on to a different, he's not really pushing for, supporting that. That's a fair way to put it, Bruce?
That's my understanding from talking to him and the emails.
That's a major portion of the extra. The other is security system, which actually we bid that in, as part of the other security project, and the wastewater portion was much less than 70. We can deal with that separately outside of this, because it was much less than that. So that's item number 2. Item number 3 is construct gate or access gate upgrades. When we went through this, there was some question marks as to whether we needed it or not. It's automated gates, so when you go in and out, you don't have to get out of the truck, and it more than anything, it ensures employers use them to ensure that the gate actually gets closed, because a lot of times, the gates don't get closed behind, and it just provides-
$25,000 for an automated gate?
Well,
That was
there's 2 of
based
them.
on what we thought they were gonna do. Somebody in our office in Madison looked at that, just threw a dart at
Yeah.
something, yeah.
I
I'm not
think,
sure that's what you ended up getting, Mark, but yeah.
but I
But
think
they can
that-
cost that much. They can cost that much. Not, there's all, you can go from here to there with automatic gates.
Yeah,
So-
and the question is whether that's something we want to, put in there to further, review on the pricing. If it's not something that's a priority, that's another one that can be removed. The one out of here that I think that we ought to maintain is the chlorine analyzer. We've had some, from a safety standpoint, in the chemical room with chlorine. Chlorine's very, it's a dangerous gas, and, we need to do some things for our employee safety. So I wish we had actually more that we could do out of this monies for that area, but right now, that's what we have in there. So out of these 4 items, you're basically down to about $10,000. So if you want to wait 2 weeks and make that decision, that's fine, but I'm.
Yeah, what would happen is that wouldn't be added to Gunlock's contract. You would just not sole source, you'd go out and take your own informal quotes for that piece of equipment. But what's gonna happen in the final numbers is that then you would maybe be de-obligating more like 400,000 instead of 411, and that has to be determined. RD has to know what you're doing in that regard before we close. So you just saw this, so I told Ray, I said I wouldn't push you to have to make a decision tonight, but I think when she gets this packet, I gotta make her aware that these secondary priority items are under consideration, and you may be using some of that money for some of those.
I guess my thoughts are that some of these are non-necessities. I think we should just keep focusing on updating the plant with the extra money on things that are gonna save us money and not, you know, like Ray said, the chlorine analyzer, I think that's a good thing, but the gate and the security system, I mean, I don't foresee that. I think we should concentrate on things that are gonna give us some payback.
Well, we can't use the money for anything else.
Well, then I don't think we should.
You know, then it would be de-obligated, and you would have a different principal and interest payment, less, it would be less. So there isn't a choice that we don't, that used to be the way it worked, Mark, is that you could say, well, okay, let's just see what else might do that we didn't think of, and you can't do that anymore. And that was a national chain, so.
But you did say upgrading with a piece of equipment would be able to go into here, right?
What
Is
do you
that into here, like the loader that they have down at the waste plant?
Yeah, that's
If
in
it's,
Well, that was in the original
that's in the
project.
original.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the stuff in the original project we're gonna do.
Yeah, oh, I understand that.
But if you, for example, if you didn't have a loader in there and you wanted to do it, you could only do it if you were to go to RD on some sort of bended knee, since they had prior approval, and say, please, would you now let us do it? That doesn't work very well in the policy, but that's the only alternative you would have if you wanted to use the money for something other than those four things.
And these are the ones that we can consider, and
Yes.
the one that's being recommended is the chlorine analyzer.
So
And
we
if you-
can make a motion tonight on that.
Yeah, you just had to give them direction.
Yeah, if you wanted to do that and say the only one we're gonna do is that, then I would somehow let Brenda know that as part of my submittal to her. And then I may have to revise some numbers, because, you know, they're very detailed. I mean, right down to the penny, you gotta give them all the updated costs with a 3% contingency. So if we're gonna do that chlorine analyzer, I might have to redo a few things for her, but it's the way it goes. That's what we have to do.
Well, we can buy that on our own if it's only $7,000.
Well, we can do, even in the project, if it's under $100,000, we can.
Yeah, you can buy it on your own. You can use whatever solicitation policy the city has. If your policy allows you to just go pick brand X, then you can go buy brand X. If your policy says for something like this, you need to take 2 or 3 quotes, then you take 2 or 3 quotes. And it depends on the equipment, but what RD doesn't direct you at all. If it's one of these informal solicitation things, you do exactly what your policy allows.
It just adds a little extra.
But it would come
money
out
in
of
the
project funds.
You know, to pay for it, rather than take it out of, you know, your,
If you
Your
don't do
wastewater
it
funds.
out of project funds, then if you want to do it, you've got to take it out of your budget.
Is it gonna cost more in engineering fees to add things?
Well, it depends on, I forget, there was a number there.
There's
Maybe it was $1,000.
it's $1,000.
But it depends how you do it. If you want us to put together a spec for this chlorine analyzer, okay, that you can go out and take quotes on, there'd be some cost. Okay, if you were to have Bob or whoever, these guys could say, well, we know chlorine analyzers, so we'd like to get a brand X or brand Y or whatever, then there's no engineering.
Yeah, I think in these cases, even in the security system, if we were to choose to go that direction, we've already
Right.
gone out on our own.
Right.
We don't need it engineered, and there would be no cost, you know, for Mead and Hunt.
Right.
I believe that analyzer would be the same thing. I
Yeah.
think they know what they kind of want.
I agree.
Yeah, so.
I would like to see us just get the analyzer and not have the engineering if these guys are comfortable with it, and save the rest of the money.
Yeah, and then de-obligate the rest
Yes,
of the money.
I agree with that.
I don't, one of the things I might want to check on, and I don't know if we could do that, you know, quickly, is that a good number for that piece of equipment that you would get for that? Somebody threw a dart at that, like Bob, or, I don't know who came up with it, is it 9 in there?
Seven.
Seven. You might want to, before before we finalize numbers with RD, you might just wanna double check and see if you
Well,
can get what you need for.
Can they approve that based on the piece of equipment, and we can quickly,
Yes.
within the next couple days, get the price?
Yes, the only thing I would need to do, as soon as we know whether it's 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever it is, I need to know that so I can let Brenda know how much we're not
I
gonna.
mean,
be
even if we
obligated.
put it in at 10,
Yeah,
I mean, it's still a small
well,
enough
we have to
number.
justify that somehow, because she's looking at 7 in that thing. So if we confirm that it's more than 7, we gotta let her know that, make sure everything's cool,
Yeah,
and
well,
whatever.
Yeah, we can get that taken care
Well, we could make the motion not to exceed 10, and then they could get you the information on the exact
But
cost.
if
You
it
wouldn't
comes
even
out to
have-
be 15, I think you don't
You
want to
wouldn't,
put a
I
price
would,
to say that's what we
Ray,
want.
I would suggest you don't have a number.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, I would suggest what you do is you're gonna award the contract to Gunlock for the bid amount. The other thing you would do formally is to approve, out of those secondary items, to approve the purchase of the chlorine analyzer and not the other 3. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Mr. Fleischer, is there anything that we need to do down there that you're aware of?
What?
Anything we need to do down at the plant besides what's in the project?
Your best not talk to supervisor.
Yeah, but we can't do
Well,
it
he's
anyway.
not here.
But you
That's
can't
why.
do it in the
But you
project.
can't do it anyway.
that's extra cost.
Well,
These
only
are the
with
only
your
things
own
we
We
can't
can't use
use.
their money, I mean,
Yeah,
so. It had to get into that one.
You know, if it hasn't been on a secondary priority list, that's the process now. I mean, we talked about that, we could have put on that list anything we wanted at the time. Those are the things that the city
Yeah,
came up with.
number 4, the analyzer.
Ready for a motion then?
I guess.
Oh,
You got anything, Sandy?
no, I agree with, we need that chlorine analyzer.
I
mean,
would
that's
do
a
that
safety
separately.
issue.
I would make the
Separate.
award a motion and do the chlorine analyzer separately somehow, however you want to do it.
So exactly how did you want that motion
Well, the first motion is in your packet. Yeah.
packet? Okay, right.
I make the motion, we approve the USDA-RD wastewater treatment plant project be awarded to Gunlock Champion, not to exceed the cost of
That's not, excuse me.
That's not the
Mark,
one?
it's not a not to exceed, it's a lump sum price.
lump sum price of $3,873,000,
But it does need to say contingent upon rural development approval.
contingent upon rural development approval.
Right.
I'll support.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Next, we go to the
Well,
waste,
I think you wanted to,
the
He wanted that under separate motion. I make the motion, we approve the chlorine analyzer.
Support.
approved purchase, we don't know.
Purchase.
well, that's part of the project.
Part of the
As-
project,
as-
purchase it.
Maybe you want to refer to it as we approve the purchase of the chlorine analyzer as the only item on this Group 2 secondary priorities or something like that. We can figure that out, just so it's clear. I don't think it's that important either way. Because I think it might be good if your motion also included then to deobligate or inform rural development that you want to deobligate the remaining funds. I think if we wrapped all that in one,
I'll make a motion, we inform rural development that we're deobligating the funds and we're only purchasing number 4 item, which is the install of the chlorine analyzer.
that sounds close
Close enough. I'll support.
as far as I can tell.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menigini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Now approve the USDRD Water Sewer Phase 2 recommendations.
Yeah,
Mr. Hawkinson.
There's not much to discuss. We're going to award that to Baco Construction. And it didn't matter whether we're going to take on the additional funding or whether we cut stuff out of the project. The reward would be for their bid amount. So that's just the same kind of thing. You're awarding to, and I guess it's already typed in there, contingent upon RD approval, which is fine.
Yeah.
Discussion, or anyone to make that motion?
I'll make the motion then, that the bid for the USDA-RD Water/Sewer Phase 2 project be awarded Tobacco Construction contingent upon rural development approval for a cost. Do you need the cost or not to exceed, which it says here?
Just for cost.
Just
If it's
the
a
cost
unit-
of, the big number, $4,930,196.20.
Support.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Okay, now, I will just tell you that the gun lock contract is a lump sum contract. That cost can only be changed by a change order that would bring that cost up or down. Tobacco contract is a unit price contract where every quantity of work, we've estimated the quantity and he's got a price, foot of pipe, this. And we keep track of those and he's paid on the actual units that go in.
That's
So-
that's what we're used to with these
Yeah,
projects,
yeah.
balancing.
And so in the end, what he's paid will never exactly be what the bid award is. So just so you understand the difference in the two. So good.
And you've always had a good dealings with Waco. It's a good company.
Yeah, I've had several projects with them. The last one was 08, 09, and 10, 12 million in municing, and I have to tell you, it was one of the, for a large project, it was one of the smoothest projects that I've ever been involved in terms of working with the contractor. The town was a mess. I mean, we did a lot of stuff. Had no issues, had no claims at the end, and I'm certainly looking forward to the same kind of relationship with them on this one.
Is there any other questions or comments?
Ray, when do you want to talk about the funding later or at some point, or what? Or,
That would be okay.
yeah, it's up to you. I mean, 2 weeks ago, you authorized me to do the applications for additional funding from rural development, water and sewer. Did those. The Thursday following your meeting, Dr. Hayes signed, Mayor Hayes signed those. They were emailed down to RD. Brenda saw them on Monday, which was a week ago today. She got those down to the state office. Towards the end of the week, either Thursday or Friday, the state office emailed a request for those monies to the national office, and today they turned it around and actually committed the funds.
Wow.
Yeah, which was, I had got an inkling it was going to be pretty quick from the state engineer. They give the highest priority to projects that want more money because they're over budget. Now, the only thing that changed from what we discussed is that they only offered loan money on the sewer side. If you recall, you got some grant money on the sewer side with the sewer portion of the project last time. What happened is, we were informed, there's a formula that they use. It's pretty complicated. I'm not going to get into it, but it uses the median household income as part of the formula. And in 2010, and every 10 years when they do the census, every community gets a new median household income number. And it takes them several years before they implement that number, at least for RD. And when the money was committed, apparently they were still using the old number, and you got into the grant program. They're now using the new median household income number, and when they plug all this stuff into the computer, this time it came out that you're not eligible for any grant funds. We were looking at a potential 45% grant on that. So they've offered loan only. Now, we said, and they concurred, that your existing member, we talked about the existing budget, that the cost for the additional principal and interest payments would come out of the budget that we formulated when we did, for the sewer side, when we did the wastewater treatment plant project and the collection system. Okay, that's still the case. In other words, instead of taking, I don't remember exact numbers, but taking $4,500 or $5,000 from that surplus, I'll call it, because of the rounding of the rates, remember that discussion? We need to take like $9,000. And that would be there anyway. So that's the issue. The papers are here to sign, for the mayor to sign, to turn around so they can process that. So this is remember we said you didn't have to take it? Well, this is the point where you sign these, you're making the commitment, you're gonna take on those additional loans.
What is that gonna do to our rates, being this
Nothing.
was grants before and now it's loans?
Nothing.
Nothing?
I remind you, I said,
Well, the original grant still maintained.
Oh,
It's
the
just the
original
extra,
grant
it's just the
Okay.
extra money.
Oh, it's the extra money.
Just the extra
it's
money.
just the extra money, you didn't, I was hoping that because you got into the grant program last time, I was hoping you'd get a 45% grant on that part of the sewer. Okay, but because of the median household income calculation thing, formula, you're not. So, again, I don't know if it's clear to everybody, but the budgets that you developed, that your rates are now set at, but will hopefully be able to be reduced because of the interest rate cost savings, remember, we talked about when we closed, that's still there. The budgets you developed have the money to pay for this additional loan, and these loans are being committed at the low rates. Okay, the sewer's at 1.875 and the water's at 1.325. So with this money, even if rates go up next quarter, you're locked in.
Are we locked in now?
Yeah, you get the choice of whatever's the lower. Well, you could have your choice, but usually take the lower when the funds are committed or when you close the loan. Now these new loans will be closed the same time as the other ones. Okay, so the other ones, the sewer's at 3.25 and the water's at I think 2.5. Okay, so when you close the loans, and that's why I'm expediting the paperwork so that we can still hopefully have a chance to maybe close them before the end of the year. I mean, I'm not gonna be real optimistic about that, but we don't foresee big changes in the first quarter. But in the first quarter, whatever the rates are, they're gonna be lower than your original loans. You'll take those, but on the new money, if they're higher than that, you could take the lower that you have now, because that's when the funds are committed. But these loans are pretty small potatoes compared to the big ones, so. But you are locked in at those rates, those are pretty good rates. So, I mean, I would, if you're looking for me, I would recommend you go ahead and do it, even though you didn't get any grant on the sewer side, and we do the project that's been designed instead of looking at cutting things out. You can cover the cost of the principal and interest payments on the new money with your current budget, no consideration for any rate increases because of that. And you still then, you have, assuming interest rates are gonna be lower than what you have, which I would almost guarantee they will be even next quarter. You have those savings, and now you have the savings from de-obligating on the wastewater plant, which is the sewer side, $400,000 worth of money, which is like $14,000 a year. That can be put in the pot to do with whatever you want.
So the rates are going down?
Well, I mean, you have to think about what you really want
Yeah.
to do,
Yeah.
with all that. But you certainly could use the numbers when we get through closing. You certainly could use those numbers to consider.
How long is this additional loan?
It's blended in with the other one, actually, it's 40 years.
And there's no way we can pay it off early?
Yeah, but yes, you can pay it off anytime you want, but at 1 3/8 or 1 7/8.
How much is the additional loan?
It's,
What should we look
on
at?
the water side, it's about $3,000 a year. About, I can't remember the exact number, Scott, but it's about $3,000 a year or so for 40 years, for the additional $73,000. On the sewer side, it's gonna be more like $9,000 a year. And on the water side, you had $21,000 extra in the budgets that were adopted because of the rounding of the rate thing. And on the sewer side, you had about 15. So the 3,000 comes out of the 21. You still have 18 more than you need in that budget. And the 9 comes out of the 15, so you still have 6,000 more than you needed in that budget.
Good news.
So I think the council has to be, on board and okay with proceeding with that funding. Because you have two options. You sign the papers and it goes forward and it gets blended in with everything else. Or you say, we don't want the money. But then you have to take that amount of money out of the project.
Would someone like to make a motion or make
Well-
any other
I
comment?
don't think we have to do anything, right?
Well, I think we should do
Not as far
something
as
to
I'm
make it
concerned,
official.
you folks.
If you want me to sign papers, we should have something official.
The only thing is, we can use that money if we have a change order through the project, because nothing goes the way it's supposed to. And that
We have a
plant is full.
contingency for that. Yeah, the whole thing becomes one pot, Mark.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, we can use this extra money and eliminate things out of there if the project goes over because there's some
We-
problems.
We could at the end if we see that's happening.
Okay,
You know, but we have a pretty decent contingency in there.
okay.
You know, I don't see a lot of surprises on this project, but there are going to be some. There always are things, daily, come on. But hopefully, the majority of them don't result in a lot of extra costs. They're covered. You know, I know 40-year loans are, you know, you pay a lot of interest on 40-year loans.
Well, I thought last time that we talked about this, that you had said that we couldn't pay it off early, that we had to go look
No,
over it. And if we keep
no.
adding things and adding things to it, yeah, it doesn't cost the city nothing right now. We don't have to do it, but this percentage rate,
Yeah, see, here's my take on, you know, I feel a lot differently about municipal finance than I do about personal finance. Because what you're doing, you're putting infrastructure in the ground that's good for, you know, 100 years, the stuff they use today. So why not take those costs of doing those improvements and letting people pay for them for a longer period of time, instead of one generation paying for them over a shorter time period, and everybody else getting them for nothing. So, especially with low interest, even without grant consideration, you know, I think when you get these low interest loans, that from a municipal financing point of view, even though you're paying interest dollars, I think getting those projects done and letting the people pay for them is the way to go. Some people might not agree. Some people might agree. Some people try the dime a time plan. Save the money first and then do it. So then all these people are paying, and Mrs. Jones passes away and her street never got done. So,
The only thing is, you get a better rate too once they're here.
right, and, yeah, it's a philosophy. I don't have a problem stringing out debt for municipal infrastructure that's gonna last a long, long time. And if you, all of a sudden, the city ends up getting $100 million somewhere out of the sky, and you say, let's go pay our RV loans off, you can do that. You can do that.
Bruce, what decision did you need the council to make at this point?
I think the council should just be all, because the sewer one came back with no grant, which is what we talked about, you know, I just think that it's going to be good for the council to all be together with wanting the mayor to sign the papers to move forward with those loans. I think that, I don't know whether you need a motion or you just need to concur or not object. I mean, I don't know the formality. Grant can tell you that, but I don't, you know.
I prefer we make a motion that we approve the extra loan myself.
I'll make a motion, we approve the extra loan and have
Hot water and sewer.
water and sewer,
Well, you've got two of them here.
two separate, you want them separate or all together? They can be
You
all
can have
together,
them
right?
together, I just think you should say for the additional water.
For
and
the
sewer
additional
fund.
water and sewer, and have the mayor sign the loan paperwork.
I'll support.
Yeah, that's, as far as I can tell, it's fine. If the mayor's happy with it.
Well, can you?
no, I would like to talk to Scott Kenny before anything goes further. That's, so I say no.
Well, hang on.
Mrs. Brew?
Hang on. There's a motion on the floor that I think needs to be clarified, and then you guys can discuss it, whatever you want. I'd like to, Bruce, if you can, since you're talking about loans and you're talking about obligations, I think the basic premise that's put on the floor is appropriate, but if we could identify the amount, I think this is the same one we talked about last time, so it's probably on the record as far as the amounts.
Yeah, you're supposed to put the amount on the record.
Yeah, just if we could put, you know,
Sure.
Mark, you made a motion to approve the water and the sewer additional loan obligations that were discussed at the last meeting that the council already approved requesting. But if you could put the amounts, I think that's appropriate as well.
Yeah, I think the water was 73, Ray. And the sewer was, it should be in some of the paperwork you got there. I think it was 261.
you're going back to Scott's comments
Yeah.
about the water side particularly, just take the money. That's just-
Yeah, I don't like to see paying an interest rate when we're getting less interest than the money that we have sitting there.
Yeah, and I don't
I'd
even,
rather just, you know, that's because things are gonna keep coming up, and we're gonna have to crank up our city bills, our utility bills, and they're high enough for people.
yeah, it's, well, you don't have to for this stuff, you don't have to increase any rates, but if you have a pot of
Well,
money.
it just, they will, if other things keep coming up, then you're gonna have to say, well, we got a low percentage rate here, well, we'll have another low percentage rate, it's just gonna keep adding up.
The question, I guess, with that is, and I don't know what kind of reserves you have, or pots of money you have, but the question is, you have enough so that if you take, especially on the water side, it's a lower number, 73,000, it's much bigger on the sewer. If you take that and use it for this, you have enough left in there to do whatever things might come up for you.
Well, then you go in to look and see the loans.
You won't get, if you go on the open bond market, you're not gonna go back to RD for a separate issue for that.
No.
So if you don't do it now, you're probably not gonna do it. So the question that I would have, you know, for Scott's level is, do you feel comfortable in taking $73,000?
I mean, you can defer it too, if you want, until the next meeting.
Taking that and put it in the project yourself and not use our money.
Bruce, at one time when we were talking, we said that we could move forward up until the bond closing time, or up until just about that time, and if we didn't want to take the extra, we have all the way up to that point.
Well, what's gonna happen, and I don't know, I think, I'm not positive on this, Ray, but I think the signing of these papers kind of obligates you to continue to go forward. That's a question for RD.
Yeah, because I thought you said last time we could wait.
You could, by waiting, you wouldn't be signing these, okay? You wouldn't be signing the papers, you would put that on hold. But the loan closing on all the other stuff, the moving forward, is not gonna happen until this is determined. Because this is blended in with the other ones.
Well, do you think we're gonna close before the end of the year? Otherwise, we got time to think about it.
It's pretty iffy, Candy, really. You know, I think I gotta be straight with you because of, here's what happens is that, right now, tomorrow, I'm actually gonna hand carry, because the two contractors are local. So I'm gonna go over and bring the notice of award and the letter that goes with that, over to both Gunlock and Baco and get them, and talk to them and get them moving on their bonds and insurances. They have to get that, I have to look at them. I want probably Steve Tinty to look at those quickly. We execute contracts. All that's gotta go to RD then, because they are a party to signing the contracts. That's gonna take 1 to 2 weeks probably to do all that stuff. Then I've gotta get them a couple packages of stuff, the bills for the reimburse, that's on my shoulders, that's not a big deal. But then, so we're gonna be into December, for sure, by the time that happens. They have everything. Well, then they've got to coordinate a closing with the bond counsel from Detroit and all the other players. And that happens at their office in Gladstone. And with the holidays and the people involved, as you get towards there, that's the iffy part. Are they going to be able to pull that together with a date? And it's getting tenuous, even if we move the paper along.
So a long story short, postponing it would not hurt us at all. It wouldn't hurt the transfer of the papers, because I think we need
said
to
it
keep
might.
stepping forward. I mean, is it gonna hurt the transfer or not?
It will not, it will not delay the paperwork with the contractors, okay?
I understand that.
Unless, the only way it would is if you decide, instead of taking additional money, particularly on the sewer side, you're gonna take stuff out of the project. Because now we gotta do a draft change order that we would sign the same time we do contracts, and that has to be reviewed by RD. That would put things back.
But like you said before, I believe, is that if we go after the extra money, we still don't have to spend it. We're just verifying that we
Well, no,
will.
it'll be in the project, Mark. It's
It'll-
gonna probably be spent because we need it to do the stuff that was bid.
Oh, okay.
You know what I
I
mean?
thought
The
it-
stuff
yeah.
that you're short, that's in the
extras.
project. So we're not just getting extra money for the heck of it. I mean, we're getting extra money so we can build what was bid. And if you don't get the money, we gotta take stuff out of the project that equates to the shortfall. We have to go in, and remember I talked
What was
about.
what was
Vine
the
Street?
amount?
Sewer was
200
$272,000, water was $73,000.
It's 73 on the water side and 272. So I don't know if the concerns about not borrowing money because you could take it out of your pot of money, that's just on the water side, I would doubt you have 261,000 of extra money on the sewer side.
Well, I guess I threw the motion on the table. I would like it to include the sewer would be the 272,000 and the water would be the 73,000 into the project.
Because there really isn't enough in there
No,
for us to do them projects. We don't have the cash to do it.
No, we would have to take,
start draining some of the,
the amount, what Mr. Kenny was saying at the last meeting is, there's going to be an amount of money brought back into the fund from monies we spent for engineering. And that will be a cash flow, initial cash flow in the fund, and his suggestion is, or one thought was, you use that to fund the extra amount. Little closer to the, 272 on the sewer, with the water, it wouldn't be a problem.
or
So
a
the
wash
question-
would be taking that money and paying down the loan. So it's gonna be the same either way.
Gives you some flexibility
It
on
gives you
what
some
you
flex-
use the
yeah.
funds.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, you could
I don't know your
fund
finances well enough to know
contingency.
what you got for that extra
Yeah.
money, but from what I perceive, when hearing all the discussions, you don't have lots of extra money in either fund, but maybe you do. You're getting this money back that you've spent, and I thought, and my perception was that all this engineering money that you spent has kind of put you in a deficit position, particularly in the sewer fund.
It has, and the water now.
So you've kind of taken piggy bank money to pay the engineering up front, and now you're getting that back.
Well, on the water side, it was the couple winters ago when we had all that, the freeze
Freezing.
issue. We used up our fund balance to deal with that
So
issue.
I mean, we need the money to finish do we need the money to do the project? So the kickback we're getting from the engineering in the end that we already
It's not
paid
a
for.
good word.
Well, the money that we're getting back,
From the
that
lowering
we've
of the
already
interest.
put out
Some reimbursement.
Oh,
to
getting
reimbursement,
yeah.
we could pay down the loan, so we have to continue on the project either way.
Yeah, except, I guess I'm just thinking out loud here, Mark, but it doesn't make sense to borrow money and then 2 months later pay down the loan. I mean, you might as well not borrow it at all, if you're gonna do that kind of.
Well, I mean,
turnaround.
if we don't run into something, we have the cash on hand because we got our reimbursement, if that's what you're
Well,
calling it.
here's
from the
something else,
engineering.
Ray, just let me say this first. This is something else that's going through my mind. Okay, you've got a lot of streets that aren't gonna get fixed up because we're not putting sewer the rest of the way on Second, and we're not gonna do the half of the street over here because we're only putting in one utility. This money you're getting reimbursed, okay, certainly if that creates now, it fixes your deficit, but gives you any additional money, you may want to consider using some of that to do the rest of some of these streets.
Yeah, we're gonna have local share.
And so that's why, I think that would be pretty important to do.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying when you related and you said 2 months down the road repaying it. I'm talking about at the end of the project, repaying down the debt if the money was still there and not used for anything
Yeah.
like you're saying.
And you
So
could-
I'm not saying borrow the money and then
Yeah,
pay it off in 2 months.
I believe,
Hold the money.
don't they have you
Can't
take,
pay it off, last time, we'll have to go back to the meeting, we can't pay it off early. It was said last meeting that we can't pay it off early.
I think you can refinance,
You
you can refinance somehow or do something with the
you can pay it
RDOs.
off early, but what you can't do is if you're obligated under X amount of millions of dollars on loan, that at the end of the project, you take a lower loan amount. You pay that loan amount, but what you do is you take the money and you put it towards one of the required, funds that they make you,
Yeah, but if-
fund.
but-
And so then you don't have to have as much to
But if you
to
loan,
fund that.
but if you have if you have a $5 million loan you take out with RD, okay, and I die and leave the city $100 million, and you go to RD and say, we want to give you $5 million and pay up our loan, you can do that. They will take your money.
Yeah, to pay it off, but not,
Pay it off.
they won't take the million and say, well,
Right.
now you have to pay $4 million.
Right.
They won't change your
You can
payment
pay it
structure.
off. It's not like a house mortgage where you can make additional principal payments.
Right. They don't change your payment amounts.
You
you
still
can-
have to pay the same
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah. So with all of these unknowns with these streets, it would seem to me with all these unknowns with these streets, you might just want to think about that. And we don't have any good numbers, but I'll tell you, there's some considerable stuff out there that won't get rebuilt, and stuff right next to it or right down the street will be. There's some stuff up on 7th Avenue. There's 1 or 2 blocks on 2nd, and there's some half streets in places. And I would think it would be pretty important to try to come up with the money to finish that stuff.
While they're here, you're gonna get your best rate.
Right. You might could get them to do that work for some of the same unit costs they got. It's a pretty good price in by 2 minutes.
Any other discussion, otherwise there's a motion on the floor.
Can we,
Do I have to
yeah, I'd like to,
retract my motion, my support?
well, I'd like to, I think just for cleanliness sake, Mark amended his motion to include the, I think it was $272,000 for sewer,
Yeah.
and then $72,000 for.
73.
$73 for water.
$73,000 even for the water, from who? R and D.
RD,
Rural development.
Rural Development.
additional loan to cover the cost of the project.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah,
That was
that's
Mark's,
it.
that was Mark's amended motion, was to clarify that, so,
Then I will support that amended motion.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Plouffe, are you still?
No.
Mr. No. Okay, Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? I don't have anything else.
Keep the engineering costs down.
Yes.
Is there any discussion on number 10 for vacating? Do we want to proceed with that or go on to the next? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I think you should at least make a motion to decline if that's what you choose, and then we can come back and redo it a year from now. That puts a final to it.
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Support.
This is a motion to not approve.
To not approve,
Resolution.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Approval water department battery backup equipment for 14th Avenue pump station, well site, and HP tank.
Yeah. Okay, this issue was recognized as a potential problem this past year, and we had discussed this in the budget. We accounted for some monies in the budget, but with the lightning strike that we had at the well site and the tank overflow, this showed that we need to move this along and get this battery backup equipment, which would cover the 14th Avenue pump station, the well site, and the high-pressure water tank. We have two components of this. I'd like you to approve, both components, but as a total. It's FDS. They would be installing the computer controls or installation equipment and computer controls, 2,300. And then GoTech would be providing the equipment and also some programming into our network for $2,547.40. The total is $4,847.40. One of the reasons why we did not include this in the upcoming project is because this came up after we put our scope together, and we can't just include this type of work in the scope with RD. So we're going to handle this off to the side and get this taken care of.
This Fairchild, is that the one we decided to go to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Jesse's been handling now our PLCs and so.
This 120 volt sensor, does that have to be wired into the unit, or how is that installed?
Chris is here tonight. He can answer technical questions.
So the initial problem was that there was no way to sense whether the power actually would go out at the well site at 14th Avenue or at the water tank. So if the power went out, nobody was actually alerted to this until a problem happened like the water tank overflowing. Jesse and I looked at some solutions to getting that monitoring built into our current SCADA system, HMI system. We initially looked at putting in a sensor right on the main breaker box that would actually look at the voltage and take readings from it and then trip if it went off. The problem we ran into was that the breaker boxes that are in most of the sites are ancient, and it would cost a lot of money to try to retrofit them if we could do it at all. So the second option was to go with a different kind of battery backup system that we were going to put in anyway, that would allow us to actually take readings out of that battery system and feed it into the PLC program, which would allow us to trigger alerts if the power goes off. So basically, we're reading the 120 voltage coming into the UPS, which should tell us if the power goes out in that building, and then alert send the alerts out to the people that need it.
So is there wiring, how does this unit
All
come
there
in?
is the UPS will be basically plugged into the wall, into the 120 outlet in the wall, and there'll be wiring that comes out of the UPS into the PLCs that'll be taking readings and sensing if the power goes out.
So is there the wire that goes from the PLCs, is that 120 volt, or what is
No,
that?
It's just
It's just a
communication wire.
low communication
It's
wire?
low voltage wire, that's all it is.
So there's no wiring that's involved with just plugging it in?
It's just plugging it in, yeah. We have to cut a hole in one of the boxes and run the cable through, but that's about it. It'll be a matter of running the low voltage cable that goes from the sensor on the UPS to the PLC, and then FDS will be handling the programming of the Johnson Controls PLCs to be able to read that information and push it into the HMI system.
If these power boxes were updated to current, would that cost a small fortune?
I don't know.
You don't?
I mean, they're basic, they're very basic, breaker boxes, master switch that throws down.
Any idea how old these are, Ray?
Probably 87.
87?
Grant, do you need to be some kind of a license for low voltage? For low voltage installation that are going through a breaker box?
You're talking about like electrician?
Electrical, yeah.
Electrician?
We're not going through the breaker box at all.
I thought you said you're just going
But
through.
There's a panel that stores all the PLCs that we have to put a knockout in.
I don't believe low voltage wire is covered under, I think it's almost like a run for the trade.
Yeah. Jesse would be the one doing it. He's done all that in the hydro already.
Okay.
If it's,
So
if you start-
it's all low voltage?
yeah, if you start talking, wiring, I think that's where the code starts kicking in, but it doesn't sound like there's any wiring going on, so.
Any questions?
Would someone like to make a motion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does any of this go out on bids, or it's just we're utilizing the people that we've had before?
We're utilizing people we had before because of the PLC work, the SCADA work, and the network work.
Anybody interested in making a motion?
I'll make the motion that FDS and GoTech be approved to provide the equipment and installation of the battery backup equipment for the 14th Avenue Pump Station, well site, and high-pressure water tank for a price not to exceed $4,847.40.
Support.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Bruce?
Yes.
That's it for our meeting, so if anybody in the audience would like to make any comments on any matter, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Farm Road here in the city. When the auditor was here, he brought up the fact that there's so many outstanding electric bills. He said the same exact statement 1 year ago. What are we going to do to collect those outstanding bills?
Is our policy in place now to place those on the,
Yeah, as we said at the last meeting, we have a policy that we drafted up. I worked with Mr. Carlson on it for leaning of the properties. We have the language within the agreements that we have with the township, especially with the water and sewer. But what we did was we held off because of the utility billing. With a new utility billing system, this is going to add some work in the office to get this kicked off. And so, you know, I basically took Mary's suggestion, you know, and I brought it to her and she said, could you hold off? I held off. So we're all set to pull the trigger. We just needed to get through the utility billing.
The township is set also?
Yep, the
side?
township side is set. So that's part of the agreements that we put in place this last year with them.
Is it just for the utilities or other services that were provided? Because I think we need to look at the other services that are provided also. There's some outstanding debts there.
I'm gonna have to transfer that question over to the attorney question, legal question, because we're clear on utilities. If you have other contracts or other obligations, I'm not sure if you can just do a general lien, yeah, based on,
If I recall correctly, I think this is going back to when Mr. Godstein was on the council, when we first looked at this, so you're testing my memory a little bit. But number one, I'll put the caveat, I'll have to look into it a little further because it's been a little while. But if I remember correctly, when you started talking about under the statutory allowances, there's some limitations on being able to lien property when it comes to like non-essential services or going beyond certain, I think it was electrical, sewer, you could lien. You started to get into cable TV, it was an issue on whether you could lien it or not. I have to look into, and I don't recall, like sewer was one of the ones that you could or could not lien as well. But I specifically remember when Chris was on the council, that was one of the questions he had come up, and one of the things we looked at was, what can you lien property on for unpaid utility bills? Like can you do it for garbage collection? Can you put a lien on somebody's property for garbage collection? And I remember looking into it, that was a while ago, and I remember we took a look at it and we invoked what we could, what we knew we could, which was the electric, right, Ray? Electric and the...
well, utilities are for sure. It was electric,
right,
water, sewer.
right.
I think we felt cable was strong enough. Garbage was probably
right.
flag, but there's different, you have to deal with, you have the electric legislation, which is more recent. You have the drain code, water and sewer. They have different affidavits and different requirements, but in our process, we've accounted for that. And what council's gonna have to do, there's another decision process, acceptance, that they're gonna have on, if there's an affidavit that's filed, then we're requesting that there's different deposits that are being applied. Those also have been reviewed on a legal basis through Dickinson Wright. And we went through with the Michigan Municipal Electric, because through that organization, we contract with Dickinson Wright. And, you know, their view, their legal opinion is that we can handle those deposits in a different way based on that. So there's some things we have to put in place, and I've held off from pushing forward at the request of my staff.
Well, it's been 2 years. It's been 2 years. Mr. Kinney
Yes.
said that the previous meeting.
Yes, and we had this process ready to go this past fall, or not fall, last year in December. And, you know, we changed the billing system, so I've held off.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, Grant, that there was a problem with the township leaning township property taxes, correct? I think that's what held a lot of this up.
There were some issues there too. I mean, we collect utilities for the township as well and have some of that overlap, and that, some of that stuff had to be worked out as well.
But the city doesn't control the taxes. We're all for trying to get the money. We're all for trying to get the money.
And what is your current office procedure? When somebody is 3 months behind on their utility bill, do they get a phone call to come in and discuss it and make payments, get low-income assistance that we already pay for?
We don't provide low-income assistance. We try to get them to the organizations that do, or get them, you know, to go in that direction. We shut the utility. The
But-
question isn't so much, if you're 3 months behind, we're usually dealing with that individual. The question is the bills that are over 6 months behind. Because even under the law, we cannot lien any bills that are less than 6 months. We have to wait at least 6 months before we can even do the lien process. So what Mr. Kenny is actually saying is that first 6 months, we work in the office, we make the phone calls, we write letters, we shut off. Okay, but it's those bills that end up beyond 6 months, that's what he's saying, is you need to get those off the books, similar to what we did with personal property tax this past year, where we have those old personal property tax obligations off the books. That's what he wants us to do.
Well, then, a question, people that are over 6 months, how much is owed to the city of Norway?
I don't have that figure for you.
Approximately.
I don't have an approximate figure for you. I'm not gonna say a number because I don't wanna even be guessing,
Okay.
so I'm not gonna say a number.
Then I have a second question. Are all the new electric meters installed?
No. You're talking about the AMI?
Yeah, the
No,
newest?
no. We're waiting on additional shipments. We installed the pallets that we had. They had to reprogram them. We're waiting on additional shipments. And we're also working with the water side, you know, trying to work the process. But because we're doing it internally, I mean, we basically have to schedule those. So no, they're not going to be installed. In fact, we have a plan for working it over a 5+ year period. So it's going to take a while.
Then the meters that were changed, what are we doing with the old meters?
Well, I asked that question because you brought that up. They have no value. Those old meters, we can't give them away. Nobody wants them. And so they're getting scrapped.
What about the comment where Iron Mountain was putting in the
Iron
same-
Mountain is not putting in the same, they're putting in the new system. They're not putting in the AMI, they're not putting in the radio system back to City Hall, but they're putting in the same water meters that we're putting in, radio reads. They're
So
not
even-
going, they're putting in the magnetic, they're not putting in the,
They're doing the same reading process that we're doing now, but different meter.
that's not true.
So there's no value to
I thought
the
that
old
was the-
meter?
No,
I thought
no,
that's what they said that
they're
they were-
putting in the same meters. I called up there, and I called Kingsford. Kingsford's been doing this for the last 5 years. Iron Mountain's been doing this for the last 2 years. They're putting in the same meters we are. The only difference is the top on how the reads go, you know, on the type of read. Ours is a radio read. It's no different than going to around the community with a vehicle.
Right.
It's just that we have collector stations where we don't have to send a vehicle. And then it comes to the City Hall, and we have the software that can turn on and shut off those meters right from City Hall instead of rolling a truck. That's the big difference.
What I meant was the collection system. They're taking on the collection system like we have, but different meters. Updated meter, but they're having the same
Yeah.
collection. They don't have it collected at City Hall.
No.
They go out and collect the information
Right.
like we do now, but they have a different style updated meter.
Well,
But the collection is the same, right?
the meter is the same. The way that's collected is different. So the meter you're talking about, no, they're going in the garbage. Nobody wants them.
There's no salvage
There's no
value.
salvage value. They're going in the garbage. I mean, we could take it, I think they take and scrap them for scrap metal, but that's about it. There's no resale value on them.
Okay. Then I have another question if I have time. All the vacant buildings on US 2, like the auto parts place at Clowiston, the dollar store and the American Inn, are they, and even Petrie Antonio's mobile home area, are all those taxes paid,
They're paid.
they're paying,
Yeah.
Dollar store's bought, isn't it?
and they're
Yeah,
current?
the dollar store's bought now.
Pardon me?
The dollar store's bought.
Yeah, they have to pay their taxes.
Okay, even though they're vacant?
Oh, yeah, whether they're vacant or operating is no bearing on the taxes.
No, but they're not gonna get like on the tax roll like the Wild Bar was where.
No, they didn't
were
pay their
purchasing them.
taxes. No, they didn't pay it, and it goes 3 years. And once it goes past 3 years, then it goes out to auction. But no, they're current.
Okay. And what is the plan for the American Inn?
I don't know at this point. There's been a number of speculations, but I'm not gonna say publicly.
Yeah, it was
I haven't, nobody's contacted me. So,
They would go through the planning commission first?
depends if you have a buyer, that, depends on what they wanna do. If they come in as a motel or hotel and do the same, they really don't have to come through the planning commission. If they change use, then they need to come to the planning commission. If they add on,
Okay.
without, not just structure, cosmetic, then they have to come with a building plan. So it all depends on what a buyer would do.
And because those buildings are vacant, are their taxes lowered?
No,
They're still paying the full amount?
they're still paying the amount.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Anybody else in the audience like to ask any questions? If not, Mr. Pop, do you have any comments?
I
Questions?
have none.
I have none either.
Mr. Menegini?
Congratulations to the football team. They fell a couple games short. That's all I have.
I got a couple, Doc. I know we've been talking about the signage. I just want it on record up by 16th Avenue and our new asphalting that I'm hoping the signage, I know we discussed it several times, that it takes place tomorrow before the ground freezes because the roads are getting damaged. And I would like to see some letters sent. I know we talked about that before, but I just wanted it on record. I wanted to talk about truck parking for semi-trucks, possibly behind the old salt shed and the old original electric building. I wanted to see what the rest of the council thought, so we could get some of these trucks over in an industrial area. The people that were employed with the trucks, they'd have somewhere to park them, possibly look at putting in a plug-in and maybe charging by the month for those, or whatever everybody's thoughts were, but I would like to talk about that. Save the roads up there and somewhere to park and plug in these trucks. So I don't know if anybody's got any ideas besides what I'm throwing out there. I know we talked about it.
Yeah, and I'll just go give you some history. When we went and put our truck route ordinance together for the oversized trucks, we knew we had half a dozen or so over-road haulers lived in town. And our big concern was coming through the neighborhoods with trailers, not so much the tractors, but the trailers. And then the second part of it, and probably the first part of it, that was the second part. The first part was, as we're paving and putting new roads down, we need to protect the roads. And so weight limits and weight issues were a big concern. We've talked for 5+ years on trying to come up with a park and ride for trucks. I know that, the economy, the business community sometimes will take care of this, which is a good thing. Private will take care of it. Citgo has done some of that, where they park in that one parking lot. But we talked about trying to find a spot, for a park and ride, especially in the winter with the plug-in. We did talk about this area one time, not knowing where Milwaukee Broach was going, and we made some changes there, so, we kind of went off of it. The truck drivers that we talked to, they said two big concerns: security, overnight, security, and lighting, which adds to security. The plug-ins is a big deal. We would have to do some cleanup, and depending on how many we could park, that would be probably one of the most reasonable spots. We had a couple other areas we looked at. They weren't reasonable for the lighting and security and the plug-ins. So it would be best, Mark and I talked about it, would be best if it was over in that area. So I mean, we can take a look at see, you know, how we could possibly work it in, but, I think that would be a nice option that we could give some of our truckers.
We'd have to look at the economic impacts
Yeah.
of the city and what need there is, and it sounds like there is a need then if we get.
Yeah, and I think you're talking, at the time I was looking at it, we were looking at probably half a dozen. I'm not sure if we still have a half a dozen. We probably do stretched out at a larger area. I was looking mainly down in our R1 area downtown. But I think it's something that's good to look into, if we could come up with the way to do it.
When do you think we should come up with some sort of a plan so it doesn't get thrown on the back burner? And
Yeah, it's.
I want to see this done before some of these roads get beat up that we already paved.
I would say that looking to have something in place before the snow flies is unrealistic. I think that we have all winter to kind of get something put in place, you know, if we want to try and work on it when thaw comes next spring. And because we're going to have to look at the electric and we're going to have to clean up the salt shed, that area, what we talked about it. I think that the building should just come down and we can move the salt over. Before we get new shipments of salt, put it over in the fence, even if we just cover it and tarp it. That building needs to come down.
Short-term parking, though, I think if we're going to restrict it, like we talked about up on 16th, because it is not, and it never has been a truck route, that we need to have an option for the people that have trucks up in that area right now, so they're not scampering, trying to find their own.
We do let, we have let trucks park over in our industrial area on our property. We just don't have the plug-ins right now.
Well, yeah, yeah.
So we don't have to get
I mean,
fancy. I mean, if you have one or two, we can accommodate those right now.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what I
one or
think
two.
we should do. I mean, if we're gonna be putting up the signs, and I do think that that's what should be done to save that road, because it is ditching already up there, to give them an alternative, so when we place the signs up there tomorrow, or by the weekend, that they have an alternative on where they can park.
Yeah, I need to spend some time looking over in the area though, to make sure.
Okay,
You know, if you wanna have this done, I'd say maybe within the next month to 6 weeks. You know, it just gives me some time to look at the electric. I mean, they're gonna need plug-ins, right?
well, I'm saying that even if it was, right now, that it was not a plugged-in area, and just to get the trucks off of that street up there.
Yeah, I don't know. Give me an opportunity. I can come back and give you an idea in 2 weeks by looking at the area, because without moving the salt shed, I mean, we can't have trucks parking and then getting in our way if we're trying to get in and out of the salt shed. I gotta see how much area is over there. We can't just go behind the electric building because we don't have enough property and we have yellow, it's not yellow freight anymore. It's, you know, they park back and forth in that area. So we have to look at what makes sense.
So, yeah, I understand that, but putting up the signs and that to save our street that we already paved up there, I was just hoping to give them some sort of a option, even if it wasn't a final option.
Well, if they called and said they needed a spot, I mean, we could probably find one spot down there. We could work it in. I'm just saying, to have something official, you gotta spend some time looking at it.
Okay, the other one that I had, I've been talking with Ray. I talked to some of the other council people. I didn't catch Lee. I was hoping that we could look at talking about an indoor water filling station for jugs up at the spring. I definitely do not want to take any money out of our general fund. We have some property sale money that was attached to that area because the property had came from these people and it was sold, so there is some revenue there. I would like to see us look into something, putting something in up there. I would like to talk about that, see where we would be at. And again, I would definitely not want to take any money out of our funds, out of our general fund or Parks and Recs fund, and maybe get some donation type things started and proceed with the project. I'd like to hear what anybody else has to say on it.
Well, I was planning to bring that up myself. I think we need to make a planning effort this winter, hopefully get enough people excited about the idea of keeping the spring open 20 or 12 months out of the year. I think be a big boon to this city, just to have the spring there open all the time, and particularly if we had some type of venue for other things there, I think it's gonna be great for the area for tourism, and I'd certainly like to see something. I don't think we should do it without proper planning to make sure we know about the plumbing and make sure it's done right. And I'd like to see the DDA, and there was some positive movement on the DDA last meeting about possibly putting money towards an engineering plan, something that would be usable, expandable, and then the planning commission should decide, I would think, ultimately, or at least look at the possibilities of what to do in that area. We own a lot next door, and there's room for, I think, a lot of expansion. And again, that spring, I think, is very important to the city, and in the future could be very important to our economic welfare. So I'd like to make sure it's done right. I'd like to get the DDA to commit some funds for possibly some engineering. I don't know that we can just think it up on our own and put something there. I'd like to make sure it's done right. So I'm not sure what, maybe Mr. Hawkinson would have some idea on what engineering would cost to put in a small building.
I guess what I would, what I had talked about with Ray, and I don't know if that's the way we wanted to go, I was interested in, I don't want to see the project get out of control money-wise. I would like to see us look at the things that Dr. Hayes was talking about, make it expandable, check on the underground water, sewer side of it, put up a building with like maybe a 24 by 24 building, a unisex bathroom in there, where you could fill jugs, a wall with all the brochures on what's going on in our area, something that would match the actual spring itself, the stone, with tied in with the half-log siding for the museum, so it would kind of blend in with what we have. But I don't want to see the project get out of control. So what I was hoping we could come to some sort of an agreement where Ray could call, possibly Colin Jacobetti, he's an engineer, and just get a square foot price on what it would cost to build a building like that, so we could approach the DDA and say, this is a ballpark figure on what we're looking for, and go from there. That was my thoughts.
Any other comments from the council on that?
I'm good with that. I'd like to see something up there.
I'd like to see the prices and see what it's gonna cost to do something.
Personally, I think it's a waste of time and money, but whatever the council wants.
That spring, I think, is probably one of the most used recreational areas in the city here.
I think the one thing we're gonna have to do, I can get a ballpark price on a building. The biggest unknown, and septic would be pretty simple. You know, if we went septic, more complicated if you tried to tie that in. We don't wanna do grinder pump, bring it up the hill. You could bore it underneath the railroad and catch the sewer that's at Town, but at this point, if that's the only unit, I probably think that's probably not, probably septic would be the best way to go. The water connection piping is the biggest key, you know, because we know how it's plumbed right now to run that during the summer. It runs 24/7. I was explaining, it runs underneath and runs out a culvert, and it runs 24/7 all winter long. We just have a piping with a valve, and we shut the valve so it doesn't come up to the surface. What we'd have to do is pipe from that point over to the building to bypass that valve. So then it would come up in the building. That would involve not only engineering or some of that piping, we'd also have to deal with the DEQ, and we have to deal with, I would talk to climate, because I think Harry was the one who put that in, not a long time ago. At least that's the stories he told me on a number of different occasions. But,
I
you know,
think that was
talk-
early 60s.
Yeah.
When they changed the highway there, they discovered that.
Yeah, And he talks about how it was a tough deal to get the plumbing that they have now. So you definitely don't want to do anything to damage that
No.
of what we have. So I would want to make sure that they were involved, you know, and now it would, you know, I think we would have to, at that point, if bringing the water in, would take a little bit more. But I can get the price, see how much building is cost, and see if we want to continue the process, and I don't know if that's something.
You know, I think if you're gonna do it right, you'd have to allocate some funds to look at everything, whether it's Colin or whoever, and put together, you know, look at all the water stuff, the sewer side, those are the electrical side, those are the critical items. And then come up with a preliminary design, how it's all gonna go together, and how it's all gonna work. And it costs us to go with it. And to get all that done, I have to allocate $5,000. I don't know.
Well, I guess I would like to see us put something together so we know the cost, and if we can handle the cost and not take money out of our funds, maybe we could get some help from the DDA, some donations. We already have the property sale money that's tied to there, and see what happens. And you know, once we get a rough cost, I mean, maybe the DDA would help us with the costs and see if the project is even feasible for us.
I think you should get a grip on what a little study like that would cost, a little preliminary
Yeah.
study. And then, you know, perhaps the DDA, and I can't speak for them, but perhaps the DDA would agree to fund that study. That's what you have to do in order to get something done.
Yeah, that's what I was interested in doing.
Yeah, you know, and whether it's 3,000, I mean, it's not $500, and it's probably not $10,000, but it's 3,000 to 5,000, you might have to commit to get something that's, it hasn't, you know, that you've looked at everything, you've looked at every angle, you've looked at all, where's the excess water gonna go, how's it gonna be heated, bathrooms, you gotta have a place for the sewage to go.
Well, we have to evaluate code, because I know that we want to have a unisex bathroom. By code, we may not be able to. in a
Oh,
public
yeah,
place.
I realize that.
We have to.
I realize that,
But
but
that's
that's,
what Colin can answer that question, I would imagine.
yeah, some of that stuff could be answered with a phone call, and then if,
Yeah,
you know,
I can do that with
at
him.
least if we get some sort of a ballpark figure, we know if we want to do the project.
I'll start with that way. I'll get a hold of Colin, we'll find out from the building side. We'll make a few phone calls, Bruce and I'll talk a little bit more, and we'll see,
Yeah, I don't know
From
who
an
else
engineer.
might have the capability of doing that.
We could put a little plaque there that said Mead and Hunt, a contributor.
Major contributor.
I can't get our guys in Madison involved in something like that, it costs a fortune. But if we did it for free, it costs us a fortune. I'm willing to help any way I can.
We could even name it the Bruce Hawkinson Building.
Yeah.
well, I'll report back in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
The bulldozer was still up by the strawberry, or the tennis courts. I don't know, I haven't been up there lately. I don't know if it's been picked up for the winter. It was up there for a while, being the project has been done. That's all I have.
I wanted to bring up about the spring, but that's been done, so we'll hopefully get a report in 2 weeks. And I also wondered, do we have any plans in place to, now that we put $500,000 into our roads this year, I think the council passed a resolution, I believe it was about 3 years ago, that we would, every time we fix roads, we would do something for non-motorized travel in town as well. And maybe we could look at that at the next meeting to see what the resolution was. And if we're not going to follow then that resolution, I was a little disappointed the council decided not to expand 16th Avenue, so we could stripe it, would make it wider, make it safer for people to walk on. And it would also act like a curbing, I would think would protect the edge of the road from cars going off of it. So maybe you could bring, Mr. Anderson, bring that forward next meeting, or at least put that in our packet.
Yeah, I'll put it in there. That's actually the complete streets ordinance. It's actually an ordinance. So,
And we should look at that. And the third thing I wanted to bring up was, again, at the end of Valley View, there's a need for a street light. I was hoping Mr. Pickard was gonna take care of that before he left. I never did get an answer out of him how we can get a street light there. There is city power half a mile from there, and I've been pushing for years to get those people on city power if we can. But again, without Mr. Pickard here, I don't know if we're gonna get anywhere.
that issue is still being held up by the Michigan Supreme Court. They heard, they had final briefs in October, so all we're waiting on is their decision. Once they make the decision, and this is the Great Wolf Lodge decision, once they make the decision, then we will know how to approach specifically the residents that you're talking about for bringing onto the city system. It could be February, it could be December, you know, I don't know, we're waiting on the Supreme
We'll have
Court.
to wait and see then.
Yeah.
Mr. Carlson, any comments or questions?
I just want to wish the city of Norway and the residents a happy Thanksgiving coming up, and also the Christmas parade is Friday, December 2nd at 6 p.m. Because I was well attended and wanted to make sure the community knew about that as well. December 2nd at 6 p.m.
Good. Mr. Anderson?
No, I have nothing further other than have a happy Thanksgiving and safe hunting season.
Need a motion to be adjourned?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Support.
Dr. Hayes?
Yes?
Mr. Menegini?
Yes.
Mr. Pop?
Yes.
Mrs. Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Babalani?
Yes.